Right, this is going to be my last video for a while on opposite coloured bishops. I said already in at least one of the other videos, I found it kind of pretty hard to structure the whole opposite coloured bishop section, sort of just like pulling together everything I think I've learned from the Book of Jesus and then Dvoretsky sort of following on from that. But you know, there were also positions in this very good book, which a couple of which are actually featuring in this video here, and there were sort of some really good positions that I enjoyed going through. That they could have been in various videos I've made so far, but I didn't really sort of know where to put them without it just being another example of the same thing or the video becoming too long. And yeah, I just found the whole thing like really difficult to structure. So I've ended up with just sort of 4 games, 4 positions that I think are worth going through, and I just sort of don't want to miss them out because I sort of prepped them for a video, or at least enjoyed them to the point where I think, oh yeah, we ought to go through that on a video, and never put them on a video. So I don't really know what theme they all are. So I've just called this opposite coloured bishops mixed bag. So in theory, everything that's in here is a theme that's covered elsewhere. And I don't think that, like I said, there's anything new in any of these positions that isn't in one of the other videos that I've already done. But this one's black to move. And pause the video and see if you can come up with well, I guess a drawing plan. This is king blockades the pawn, isn't it? We've got a king over here, and in the king blockades the pawn, which is the best defensive system, the first defensive system, as Dvoretsky calls it. The only way the attacking side is going to get anywhere is by the creation of a second pass pawn over on the king side. And this position doesn't come from Dvoretsky's book, but if it did, it could easily have gone into the tragi-comedies section. Because black basically makes a right balls up of it and plays bishop h4. White brings the king into f5, and black just sort of passes. King g6, pass, take the h-pawn, pass. Black just keeps passing. White gets themselves set up, do not hurry in the endgame, gets the bishop onto b7, and then plays this g3 move. Oops. And yeah, this breakthrough is a very common thing. It's going to happen in one of the other positions here, and I just keep seeing it in these opposite colour bishops, this sort of lock pawn formation, and almost like the one pawn move you can't play. But it happens, and it's again a feature here. So if bishop takes g3, king takes g5, and we've created the second pass pawn, which is all you needed to win this. And if f takes g3, f4. Okay, this bishop's going to defend nicely along there. And I suppose it's a little bit worth seeing, because you might think black can take this and get the king to h8. So it takes, or take on h4. What should black try here? g2 maybe? Should we try g2? I mean, you can see it's not even close. And what does black try? We'll nab that, and oh yeah, you can see it's not even close. So yeah, bishop h4, complete balls up. I mean, you could try bishop c5 as well, but straight away that gets, you know, I mean, there's nothing special about bishop c5 in particular. It's just another sort of failing to identify the drawing plan. So it's not like this is easy for black to draw, kind of, although it is pretty easy for black to draw, but as in, it's also pretty easy to not think about what the drawing plan is and play lots of other sort of nothing moves like bishop c5. And all of a sudden, yeah, it's the same problem. If that pawn gets taken, king takes f4. And if white just does nothing with, I don't know, something like, if black just does nothing with, I don't know, bishop, I mean, it's saying king c7, I guess we play bishop b7, just following engine moves. That's doing nothing, isn't it? Then white fixes black's pawns with h5. And this pawn's falling. That's going to be a second pass pawn. There's no way that the black bishop on f8 can deal with, well, can't deal with it on f8. So the drawing plan, and it's very simple, to be honest. It's just such a simple drawing plan. It's like you're going to be losing one of your kingside pawns anyway. So and your bishop at the moment is preventing h4. So leave your bishop on f2. It's doing a good job, and just bring your pawn to h4. h5, king f5, h4 takes bishop g3. We're just going to do this. We can pre-move that until sort of we're not allowed to play one of those two moves. I suppose, sorry, if the white king threatens to get to b8, you need to leave your king on a7 and not let that happen. But as soon as the white king's, you know, over on the d file, we can just play bishop f2 and then come back to g3. I mean, the only last winning try, I suppose, that white could do is maybe some sort of, aha, you can't take my pawn with your bishop en passant. But I think the pawn on g3 is going to be pretty menacing, isn't it? That's probably going to be not a good idea for white. They're not really going to get anywhere with that one. So yeah, pretty simple drawing plan. Well done if you found h5, not that one, h5 and h4. A very simple fortress. Right, next. I really struggled with this one. Again, I wasn't really sure where to put it. It's white to play. And I guess it's king and two pass. Well, there's two pass pawns, but 3 files separating. Which, if it wasn't for this pawn, is just dead easy, you know. We've got the bishop defending this pawn. And if it wasn't for the black a7 pawn, we just bring our king to f8 and it's over. But the problem is that as soon as we do that, black can basically throw our bishop off the defense of c7 by just pushing the a pawn, and then sack the bishop for the other pawn. So they're going to win the 2 pawns, white's 2 remaining pawns. So when I first did this, I correctly identified that you absolutely must get your bishop to a5. If white can just get their bishop to a5, it's over. Because you have got the 2 passed pawns 3 files apart. However, for some reason I couldn't do this. So it was one of those positions I kept coming back to. And I'll probably come back to it again in a few months' time, even though it's in my own video, and not be able to solve it. I just seem to get these mental blocks sometimes. I found the first move okay. You know, attack that bishop. You've got to stop the pawn coming to a5 first of all. So king c3. I mean, for example, if you play king c5, a5, and the black pawn's got to a4, and you're just not going to make any progress at all there. Yeah, and we can leave the b4 square with our king, because the bishop's defending a3, but black can then swap the a pawn for the c7 pawn. So you hit the bishop, fine, it moves, and then you come to b4. Great, you've stopped a5 for now, but you kind of need to swap your king and bishop round. And this is the bit where I sort of struggled with it. How do you swap your king and bishop round? Because your c7 pawn's going to fall. You can't move your king to defend the c7 pawn to free up the bishop without letting the a pawn go, and you can't move your bishop to get to a5 because the king just takes the c7 pawn. So how do you sort of swap them round? And yeah, I just sort of failed to do it. Anyway, so bishop e6, that bishop's obviously in a great place. If we tried something like king c5, I think that also works, actually. Engine reckons that's fine. Oh, you have to repeat, though. It's only fine because you have to repeat. So king c5, black can play bishop b3. And now they're threatening this again. Okay, so you'd have to go back, king b4, bishop e6. So we need a different plan in this position. And it's bishop e5, so just sort of force black to do a waiting move. And then when the king goes to c8, then you come into b5. What other stuff? We'll do other stuff that black could have tried there instead of king c8. So if king c8, king into b5, black king comes back to b7. But the black bishop being on e6 is kind of a problem, because here's where we make a run for it. King c5, and at the moment the threat is king d6, which black's got to deal with. If they push the a pawn, we go king d6, the bishop has to stay on this diagonal, and then it's king d7. Or we can see those moves in the other order. Bishop stays on that diagonal, sort of a prophylactic move against king d6. You play king d6 anyway, and then they've still got to stop king to d7 because it's coming to d8, and then this bishop's going to be overworked on those two. King c8, but you've now done what you needed to do. That was the swap. Or if we go back to this position, let's say, in fact, I don't know what we say, to be honest. So you just look at the pawn push. I mean, king d6, the bishop's being hit and the king's coming to d7. I was thinking whether black could do the moves the other way around, but they can't, can they? Because king c8, and you can just, I guess king c6 and king d6 are fine there. Yeah, they are. They're both fine. So let's go back to where you've sort of played this bishop e5 waiting move, because black doesn't have to play. What did we do there? We did king c8, didn't we? So what if black leaves the king on b7 and just plays bishop f7? We can still bring the king to c5. Okay, because if the pawn gets pushed, then we can come back with the king. So the pawn can't get pushed yet. If king c8, then we come into c6. So a dual purpose king move, because we're still keeping an eye on this. You think black might think, all right, check, king here, bishop back to f7, but then you've got the bishop c3 in, or if pawn to a5, then g8 equals queen, obviously, so the bishop would have to have come back to f7 there, and then you've got the bishop to a5, which is what you need. What else? That was king c8. We could see bishop b3. That's more of a threat, isn't it, to get the pawn to a4. Previously, we had to come back to b4 with the king there, so instead of going around circles. But with our bishop on e5, we can come into d6, because now we're threatening king d7. King c8, bishop c3. And I think that's it, really. I think that's everything that was needed to do. So yeah, the king c3 is the winning move. Come and stop black playing a5. I personally got that far, and then I couldn't work out how to swap the king and the bishop. But you need your bishop on a5, and you do it by playing a waiting move there and force black to make a decision, because this bishop is brilliantly placed on e6 and this king is very well placed on b7. What was my favourite out of all of those? I think I liked... Which one did I like? The one where... Yeah, I think I like this one, the king c8, and then you come into c6, so that if the a pawn's pushed, you've still got time to come back to b5 and win that pawn. And if bishop e8 check, so that you have to move away from being able to do that, is fine because you still can maintain contact with your c7 pawn, but black now has to deal with this. And when they deal with that, you come back and you get your bishop to a5. Right, next, white to play. This one's pretty good. We're kind of going to be in the sort of first defensive system where the king blockades the passed pawn. A theme that sort of occurs a lot in opposite colour bishop endings is that it's not so much the number of pawns you've got as the attacker, it's the number of passed pawns. So a very good start here is b5 check, a takes b5, a5. There you go, already we've got 2 passed pawns, and this one's clearly pretty useless to black. So alright, we've dropped a pawn, but now we've got 2 passed pawns. So good start. Now what if black sort of just goes passive? Bishop g4. We come into b4. Black's just sort of staying passive in all of this. So black's moves are a bit sort of, you know, nothing really. Black's just saying you've got nothing. We bring the bishop round to d4 and drop it back to g1. Okay. You could have a think about why is it going to g1? What's going on there? And it's a similar theme to what's happened in other positions. We push the a pawn. This bishop's going to be here because we're going to in a minute use these. We're going to try and create another passed pawn on the king's side, which this bishop's just not going to be able to cope with. All the different passed pawns coming at it, the pants, I suppose. But this bishop's here to sort of stop any passed pawns of black's that end up getting created in the process. It's something, sort of a similar thing we've seen in some of the other positions, in some of the videos I've made so far. Indeed, I think this probably could have gone into one of the videos I've made so far. So yeah, a6, a7, king into b7, and then how about this, g4. If h pawn takes, f5, bishop takes, c6 check, because you've got to maintain defense with your a7 pawn. This isn't a million miles away from that that Botvinnik game where he's just been seen to sacrifice pawns all over the place. I think he was black, wasn't he? He had a pawn on b3 that needed defending in a similar way. He had to jettison one of his other pawns. Like say here, for example, the c5 pawn's useless, so we just get rid of. But what was it? I think it must have been a pawn on d5. There was a black pawn on d5, wasn't it? A black bishop on e3, and there was a pawn on b3 that needed protecting, whilst he was busting through on the other side of the board as well. Anyway. Sorry, just almost talking to myself there. So c6 check, obviously the black king has to go to a8 to stop a8 queen. We round up that pawn. We've got the 2 passed pawns. You can see the black's passed g pawn's useless. And our king is just coming in. That king is making its way to d8. It's over. Okay. But if we go back to the brilliant g4 move, what if black just ignores it? Bishop e8. We can still play we still have to play c6 check to defend our a7 pawn. Bishop takes f5, and again we have the pants done. Yeah. So that's if black goes passive. If he tries to sort of a more active bishop, king b7, king b4, bishop e2, we're going to see similar sort of stuff. The move played, I think this was an actual game, was bishop c4. But this allows white to sort of create a passed pawn straight away with the same sort of idea. Slightly sort of slowing white down a little bit was bishop d3, which prevents the immediate creation of the passed pawn. But bishop c4, fair enough. And here we go again, g4. H takes an f5, and there's your second passed pawn. That black just jettisons their f5 pawn to get control of h7. King into c6, defend the b pawn, which allows a6. But I mean, if instead black had played just bishop to c2 and let the b pawn go, you know, because they've got to do something. The king's nicely placed on b7, controlling those two pawns. So they can't really move the king, and they can't move the bishop off the diagonal. So bishop c2, keep it on that diagonal. You're dropping your b5 pawn. Check, comes back, keep it on that diagonal, and the white king's just going to make its way to g7. With the b pawn gone, yeah, we just make our way to g7 with the king. So black goes king c6, a6, bishop e4, a7, king back to b7. There's your b pawn gone again. Check, king a5, and it's all over. That bishop was overworked. Yes, I kind of really like that. It was just, first of all, we create an extra passed pawn on the queen side, and then we, you know, maneuver the bishop. So do not hurry in the endgame. Got that bishop back to where it was going to be, you know, not that line. Back in, if sort of black stayed passive, where the white bishop just sort of drops back to g1, ready to deal with either of these two becoming passed. I think in that line, didn't one of them end up being passed on the g file? Yeah, so completely useless pawns, utterly useless. And yet white's got these two. Right, one final position. This is Topalov versus Leko from 2005. It's basically your two connected passed pawns in opposite colour bishops. Black's got this extra one that needs thinking about. That extra one's extra to the two that are on the board, so it's not quite as simple as your two connected passed pawns. And that's it. White does have to come up with a winning plan that also contains this. Excuse me, but that's probably quite easy. Ideally, I mean, we should pause the video, I suppose, and have a think about what your next move is going to be as white. But you want to think about this pawn's got to be stopped, which means you can either have your bishop on this diagonal or this one, because it's got to be on the, you know, stopping either on the b3 square or the b1 square, basically. Now black's defensive setup, by the way, if these two pawns get here, remember, is the king on g7 and the black bishop on d8 and e7. I mean, if black gets that set up, white's had it. It's a draw. Black doesn't need their b pawn for that. But white's kind of got to be a bit extra careful, because even if the black king gets to g7 and this bishop can't make it to d8 because of the usual f6 check at an opportune moment when the white bishop's on h5, that's not going to happen here, because you can't sit your bishop on this diagonal. You just can't leave your bishop on h5, because, getting all the colours on the board now, you've got this to deal with. Okay, and that's going to mean that if you let the black king get to g7, black's easily going to be able to use this pawn to deflect white off the standard winning procedure, and that will give this bishop enough time to make it back to d8. So think about which diagonal you want your bishop on to stand any chance at all of winning with these two pawns. Okay, The best diagonal is this one, but that's not an option here. Because of black's b pawn, it has to go on one of the two green diagonals. So which one do you want it on? And then the other thing is that you cannot allow the black king to g7. Because once the black king gets to g7, it's done. This pawn is going to be too much to deflect you off the winning plan that stops black usually doing this to get the right defensive procedure. Anyway, bishop b1 is actually a winning move, but Topalov decided that the bishop on this diagonal would be better. Strikes me that that's actually the, you know, if you think about it, on h5 is the usual one, because we force the black king to make a decision here. Then it'd be nice also to control the f7 square, although bishop b1 is also fine. Yeah, so bishop c2, the king desperately tries to make it to g7. I don't know if black's realised that the g is a reasonably obvious move, square you want your king on. And any white move that allows the black king to g7 is a draw. So, for example, f5, king f7, king h7, king g7. There's no way that white can make any progress here. In fact, I think, isn't this one even the... there's not enough space to get around as well. It's almost, if that pawn was missing, it's almost that position, isn't it? The one with not enough space. Although on that one, the black king went to e7, bizarrely. Anyway, white doesn't need to worry about that, because white can stop the black king getting to g7. King h6, king g8, and it's gone. You know, I don't know why black sort of carried on from here, to be honest, but he did, and yeah. I mean, it's incredibly bizarre. Was he maybe going for a stalemate or something here? Yeah. And black resigned there. Anyway, so that's opposite coloured bishops, mixed bag. All those positions I really liked, wanted them in a video somewhere. And there they are, they're in that video.